Hey guys, I hope you enjoy this week's sermon. If you're interested in getting connected here more at the sanctuary, you can visit us at our website at tscwest.org, or you can check us out on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, all of the things. I hope you enjoy this message.
It all applies. Family is never easy or simple. There's a lot that's attached to it. My family definitely has a lot that's attached to it. I am one of 7 kids. Yep, 5 girls, 2 boys. No, my parents are not Catholic or Mormon, only crazy. And we lived with that crazy all growing up, and that was a lot. But I remember my childhood as being really happy. I was homeschooled up until high school, but in the 90s, that meant that my only friends were at church. I grew up in the country, though, exploring the land and building forts in the trees and wandering down the creeks and naming the creek, like the rocks jutting out. I was like, those are dolphins. This is now Dolphin Bend. I was very dramatic then, and I retain that aspect of my personality now. But being one of 7 kids, there was just always a lot of competition and a lot of comparison. And it's interesting because both sides of my family are very successful. Practically everybody on both sides of my family are lawyers, doctors, engineers, mayors, beauty queens. And so when you look at all of that and how it's shaped my family of origin, there's just a lot of expectation. A lot for both looks and success and all of it. You just had to live up to these expectations all the time, or you would feel like failure. Being one of 7 kids and competing with my siblings a lot for attention, I learned that, speaking of perfection and success, when I got perfect grades or when I was competing in piano and I won the contest, I got a lot of positive attention. I didn't feel invisible anymore in my own family. I felt seen. I felt like I mattered. I felt like I was worth something. And so along with that came the first lie that was attached to my identity. So you see, I have this theory about the meaning of life. You may not have known that when you came today, you were going to be told the meaning of life. Well, here you go. Jesus said what the greatest commandment is, right? Where all of the others are summed up in that one. And that is, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. Exactly. Even if you are not a Christ follower, a lot of times you've heard that verse and that calling and that invitation from God. So if that is the most important commandment, then I would venture to say that is the meaning or the purpose of life, is to love and be loved by God, others, and ourselves. And I say also ourselves, and I use that carefully, but he said, love others as yourself. And a lot of times we say we need to love others instead of ourselves. But let me tell you that one of the most powerful things that God is doing in each one of our lives is healing our relationships with ourselves. So if we are loving God with our heart, soul, mind, and strength, that's kind of all of who we are, right? Therefore, that means we are loving from our entire identity. Now, just as there is a God who is constantly trying to do beautiful things in our lives, bring healing and freedom and hope and all these good things, there is also an enemy. And we don't talk about it very often because it can sound woo-woo or it can sound scary. But there is an opposing force in our lives. And so if God is trying to constantly break down the barriers that stand between us and walking in love and being loved, allowing ourselves to receive that love, what do you think the enemy's doing? He's doing the opposite. He is trying to put as many barriers and obstacles in the way of love as possible. And one of his favorite ways to do that is attaching lies to our identities. Because if we believe lies about ourselves, then we don't see ourselves accurately, and therefore how can we love from all of who we are? So that first lie was that my worth is attached to my intelligence and my success. And the enemy made sure that he really dug that into me and made sure he had instance after instance after instance come up and, gradually over my life to reinforce that not only are those things attached to my worth, but when I fail, it means I have no worth. That's how he works. And that's just one lie. That's just one of them. How many more lies do you think he is attached to my identity? And how many more lies do you think he is attached to yours? Because it's not whether or not he's attached lies to your identity. It's what are they? And are you aware of them? And are you pushing back? So here's the thing, y'all. My parents were really good parents. They loved me and my siblings so much and sacrificed so much for us. But we're all human, and whatever is not transformed in us is often transferred on from us to our kids and to the people around us. And in my family, there has been an idolatry of success and an unspoken perspective that if there's nothing extraordinary about you, then you're just kind of not worth noticing. And that was never said in any way. My parents absolutely unconditionally loved us, but there was just this unspoken thing. And maybe we didn't believe it about other people, we definitely believed it about ourselves. If I'm boring, if I don't bring anything to the table, I don't have worth. So that expectation of perfection with success and looks and all these things didn't only apply to academics. My family was also very involved in our church. They were a part of a very famous Christian homeschooling organization called ATI, or Advanced Training Institute, which is the Bill Gothard organization. A few of you may be familiar with this organization because of the documentary Shiny Happy People. Yes, my family, we were the shiny happy people. Following all the rules and looking like we had everything together, but some heavy and some dark things going on behind closed doors. There were quite a few rules that applied to this organization, in addition to, of course, you must homeschool because obviously public school is evil. My kids are in public school, I'm kidding. But these rules included making sure our shorts didn't rise above our fingertips, not dating till you were 18, and only listening to calm Christian music. I have a few specific memories about what happens when you don't listen to calm Christian music. I was once listening to smooth jazz on my Walkman. Kids, a Walkman is, think of it like an iPod. It's a really old one. But it carried CDs and it was giant. And my mom caught me listening to smooth jazz, and she pulled it out, she put it on, she listened to it, and she goes, "Oh, Emily." Yep. Don't worry, my parents have found a lot of freedom since then. Another one was we were not allowed to watch a lot of TV. One of the only shows we were allowed to watch was The Magic School Bus. Did anybody else watch Magic School Bus growing up? I'm telling you, I know all of my science from Magic School Bus. Everything else I forgot. I loved that show. But she would try to tell us that we needed to turn on the show later and skip the theme song. Why? Because the theme song had a beat. And that, of course, is evil, and therefore we cannot listen to this evil music. Now, being the evil children that we were, not only did we turn it on early, we danced to the music with the beat. And where there's dancing to music with the beat, every evil work is at hand. I'm telling you, Gabe, you probably would be like a son of Satan to them. In case you are not well-versed in sarcasm, I kid. I'm literally married to a metalhead. He is the hulking, tattooed man you may have seen up here a few times. But yeah, you think I'm exaggerating, but also one of my earliest memories was praying for our church because they made the demonic decision to include drums. So yeah, I remember being 4 years old praying for our church because they had drums. So there was a lot of legalism. There was a lot of rules. There was a lot of, it's either this way or you are walking in sin and you are out from under the umbrella of his protection. There wasn't a lot of room for grace in that perspective. But there were a lot of expectations, and I am one of those people who, finding out the expectations, I want to at least meet them, if not exceed them. And my youth pastor's daughter told me once that she thought I was perfect. So that became part of my identity. I had to be perfect, to check all the boxes and then some. And I can tell you something. I still like to check boxes. And yes, boxes do feel good because it feels like if I'm checking all the boxes, then I'm safe from everyone's judgment. I'm safe from their condemnation. If I'm checking all my boxes, maybe you won't tear me down. But I can also tell you that when you're living just to check all the boxes, it's very empty. And I can also tell you a secret that you won't hear very often from not this stage, but other stages. You can be reading your Bible, praying, and even tithing and serving and still have an empty relationship with God. Those are boxes. They're important ones. I'm not saying it doesn't matter to do those things. I'm saying those things do not equal an intimate and loving relationship with God. But I didn't know that. I thought that's what it was to love God and to honor God, was to check all these boxes and do all these things. And so I went on all the mission trips and I led people to Christ. And I started leading small groups at 18, and I've been doing it almost solid since then. Like, I thought that's what it was to follow Jesus. So I got to the point where I knew a fair amount about God and what it looked like to follow him, but it was mostly religiosity and an attempt to fulfill the expectations of everyone around me. And really, everything in my life as a teenager was going so well, I didn't really notice or care if I was kind of missing the point. My junior year in high school, so remember, I was homeschooled, and I was such a dork. And I had never really found a real sense of belonging. In my junior year so I started going to a private school. I always tell everybody, I went to the private school just in time to be normal. And they're like, haha, it was too late for you. You're still not normal. It's fine. But my junior year at that school, I got in with the cool kids. I belonged. I felt like I mattered. I felt like maybe I was fun and maybe I wasn't boring, and maybe I was bringing something to the table, and maybe I was going to finally find that sense of belonging that I think all of us are searching for one degree or another. But then along came a boy. And this, not a boy interested in me. This was the new boyfriend of my best friend. And I actually resented his presence. I felt like he was changing the dynamics. But I also felt like, okay, well, I need to be friendly to him if he's going to be part of the group now. So, but in high school, friendliness is often confused with flirting. So trying to be a good friend to her, I started giving him hugs and telling him hello, how's your day? And everyone decided that it was because I was flirting with him. And that got back to her, and she wouldn't believe me. And so she abandoned me. And that was the first time that the enemy attached something else to me. If I don't say and do things perfectly, I will be abandoned. And I can tell you that was only the first time. Because again, the enemy likes to plant these lies, and then he likes to use whatever's going on in your life to say, see, it's true, it's true, it's true. So my friend group fell apart. I started to become depressed, though I didn't have a term for that back in, what was this, 2005? I'm old, it's fine. And I stopped trying in school, lost my valedictorian spot, applied to honors programs for college, didn't get in. And so everywhere I looked, it was rejection. My friends don't want me. The programs that I've been dreaming about my entire life don't want me. So then I must be worthless. Now I want to pause for a moment, and I want to say that I understand that there are many people in this room that have been through hell. And by comparison, these are pretty small blows. I was about to leave for college, where I would be living in a beautiful private dorm, attending the University of Texas. Almost everything was paid for by my parents. I had my health, and almost no one I loved was sick or dead. And I knew that. I knew that I was lucky. So I felt like I didn't have the right to feel the way that I did. I felt selfish and whiny, a white girl with a lot of privilege who couldn't get over a couple of hard knocks. But you know where that comparison landed me? It just meant that self-loathing joined the depression. Not that I had a term for that either at the time. And I remember thinking as I was crying to my pillow one night, is this what people feel like before they take their lives? And it scared me. But I didn't know what to do about it. I was asking for prayer. I tried my first therapist. None of it was helping. I wasn't hearing God. So I finally got to the point where I decided that either there was no loving God, like everyone said, or he just isn't love, like everyone said. Because all I could think was that if a loving God would not, if I'm seeking him with my whole heart, as I thought I was trying to do, then he must not be love. Because he said, seek and you will find. So I'm like, well, it should be simple. And it wasn't. Finally, I got to the point where I was just completely numb because it's easier to feel nothing than to feel only pain. It was at that point that some friends from my old high school peer pressured me into going to this worship conference called The Passion. Some of you are familiar with it. I thought it was going to be like all the other conferences, but almost as soon as I started getting there, I felt the walls that I had constructed starting to be torn down. And let me tell you, actually, I wasn't relieved. I was livid. I was so mad. I was like, God, the minute, like weeks after I decide, I don't want you anymore, now you want me? You were playing hard to get? Is this what was going on? But he kept tearing it down brick by brick because he's not scared of our anger. You can say whatever you need to say to God, and he can take it. So after that, I didn't know where I stood, but I was slowly starting to rebuild with God. My senior year in college, I met my first mentor, Stacy. She didn't take it easy on me. She looked at me and she said, Emily, you're on the fence with God. You got one foot in and one foot out. You want all of the benefits of being with God, but you don't want any of the sacrifice and any of the hard work. So which one do you want? Do you want him or do you not? And I had a lot of excuses and a lot of pushback, but finally I locked myself in a back room and I yelled at God. I told him I was so angry for letting me get to the point that suicidal thoughts were coming to my head. I was so angry that I searched for him for years and I heard nothing. And I was angry that he wouldn't give me an explanation for why, nor a promise that it would never happen again. And that felt scary. How can I trust a God who allows hard things and gives me no promises that he will never allow them again? But I knew I couldn't find hope anywhere else. So I was like, well, if it's in or out, then I'm in. I don't like it. I want your promises. I want your guarantees. But if it's in or out, I'm in. And I surrendered. Not long after that, I experienced God actually speaking to me. I had been following him for 22 years, practically came out of the womb screaming Jesus. Didn't really have much experience with him talking to me. And I'm really glad that I did learn how to start to hear from him because another boy came along, and this time this boy was interested in me. Now, up until this point, 22, I had never had a boyfriend. There are a million reasons I could list. I don't know. Either they weren't interested or I wasn't interested. Maybe it was the lingering rules about don't date until you think you're ready to get married. And there goes those. I don't know, but I had never had a boyfriend. And so I met this boy named Benjamin at what was his current girlfriend's birthday party. No, I'm not a homewrecker. I did not break them up. Nothing happened. In fact, all we did is have a little conversation and friend each other on Facebook, as one did in 2009. You just friended everybody that you met. I don't know why. But I forgot about him entirely. It was definitely not love at first sight. It was a, nice to meet you, I don't remember you anymore. 6 months later, they had broken up, and so he reached out, and I did not remember him at all. And I wish I had the photo of what Ben had as his profile picture at the time. I couldn't find a big copy of it. If you want to come find me afterwards, I do have a copy on my phone, but if it got blown up, it would be super grainy and you wouldn't be able to see. But basically, just imagine, he's in total darkness. This spotlight is shining down on him, and he's standing like this. He didn't have quite as many tattoos as he does now, but he's still covered in tattoos. And my goody little two shoes church girl me looked at him and was like, "You look like a terrifying UFC fighter." And I came up with some excuse of why I was not interested to go out or couldn't go out with him when he asked. And he's like, "Oh, well, I'm actually a college pastor, and so I'm always around campus. So if you want to like have lunch." So I'm like thinking this is really suspicious. And I go and I look and like maybe he is doing that, but he's also 6 years older than me. And I'm like, "Oh, you're one of those. You come and you like prey on poor college girls." Absolutely not. So I'm like, okay, I am now going to block this pedophile UFC fighter. Yeah. And in that moment, I blocked my future husband on Facebook. But we did start dating. Well, I skipped. So we finally ended up at the same party. Basically, this mutual friend both like coerced us to both show up. And I started talking to him, and I'm like, oh, maybe he's normal. Maybe he's not a UFC fighter pedophile. So we started hanging out in groups, and I shared my story with him at a pub, and he's like, "Oh, I want to share my story with you too, but my church made a video of my testimony, so let me just send that to you." Thought that was really strange, but I was like, cool, that's fine. And that's when I found, some of y'all have heard his story that he's shared here, and that's when I found out about war, PTSD, and divorce. I was like, oh, wow. And here I am when I haven't even had a boyfriend. But God was doing something, and we started dating, and things were not simple. We actually started arguing relatively quickly. We're both very big personalities with a lot of opinions, and that we were not afraid to share. And we were fighting to the point enough that I started praying and fasting because I was like, "God, am I just in this relationship because I'm tired of being alone?" Because I was tired of being alone. Because that was another thing where I doubted my worth. Because I'm like, man, if no guy is pursuing me, again, maybe it's just because I'm not worth the pursuit. And so maybe I was worried, and maybe I was just tired of that. Tired of feeling worthless, and that like nobody wanted me. But God told me in that prayer and in that fasting, you are exactly where you are supposed to be. So we got married on our 1-year anniversary. And marriage brought its own set of challenges for sure. But one of the biggest issues is that I still felt completely unstable in my mental health as well as my physical health, which had started deteriorating around that time. Started having all these gut issues, and I'd always had chronic fatigue issues, and nobody could figure it out. And I just felt broken. Which is a side note. I thought what I needed to feel like I had worth was someone to pursue me and choose me. And I had that, and we got married, and it didn't fix my self-worth problems. Let me just let you in on a secret. No human can. In all of this brokenness, I knew that there was supposed to be ongoing life change. That's supposed to be our experience as believers. This is how God shows us the hurt, shows us the wound, shows us the brokenness and the lies, and that he changes and brings healing. But at that point, I think I was 24, 25, and I wasn't experiencing any of that. And so again, I came up with against this hard place in my faith where I'm like, this is what's supposed to be happening. I'm supposed to be experiencing change, and it's not happening. So God, is it me or is it you? Because it's got to be one of us, since we're the only two involved here. And I definitely didn't like either of those answers. So then one of Ben's best friends came to him and said, "Hey, I've been going through 12-step recovery, and I've been going through it for self-hate. and I need to make an amends with you for all the ways that I have hurt you because of my isolation. And Ben saw such life change in him because of recovery that Ben jumped right in. He's like, oh, I want all of it. I want all of the healing that I can get out of this. So he jumped right in. I dithered. I was like, well, I could go through for my laziness. I could go through for my depression. I could go through this. And I was like, I don't know. What would I even focus on? And God literally was like, so you're not going to get into the 12 steps because there's too many things you could go through the 12 steps for. I don't know how God sounds to you in your brains. God often takes a very tender and sarcastic tone with me. And I was a little miffed, but I said, point taken. I'll go. So I showed up. And another reason, I have to say another couple of reasons that I showed up is like, there are two verses that were in my head. We covered one of them recently, where Jesus said, I came that you may have life and have it abundantly. And I looked at my life, checking all my boxes, and I said, that's not abundance. And then Paul said it was for freedom that Christ set us free. And again, I looked at my life and I said, that's not freedom. So I don't have abundant life. I don't have freedom. I'm missing something. I don't know if recovery has the answer, but I'm going to dive in because I need healing. I need more than what I have found for myself so far. And I showed up and I was terrified because I thought everybody who had really destructive problems, the classics of, in my mind, I thought you primarily went through recovery for the classics of, drugs and alcohol and, sex addiction, all these different things. And so I thought they were going to look at me and be like, why are you here? You're normal. Get out of here. And they didn't. In fact, they welcomed me with open arms, and they shared completely, openly, and honestly with no filters. They were not afraid of what people were going to do when they shared what they thought and what they had done. And man, was it a breath of fresh air. For the first time, I got a taste of what community can be like when you're not afraid and you know that you are already accepted the minute you showed up and that you didn't have to earn it and you didn't have to pretend to have it all together. You didn't have to pretend that faith was easy and that truth came easily to you. You could just be messy. You could just be human. And it was so beautiful to me. I could tell you so much about all the ways that recovery changed my life. I could literally have spent this entire time just talking about recovery. But I can tell you, I thought I understood the gospel. Again, I'd even led people to Christ. So maybe my mind did, but my heart had never grasped it before because I think my entire life I'd been convinced, or maybe trying to convince myself and others, that I was a good person. We all want to believe that, right? That we're good people. We look at our lives and say, oh, well, I'm not doing this, this, and this, and I am doing this and this, so I'm a good person. Nobody wants to feel like I am a broken and sinful person. Nobody wants to feel that way. But for the first time, when I was going through the steps and looking at my entire past and looking at all the ways that I had been broken and I had hurt others and myself and God out of that brokenness, even goody little two-shoes me was like, wow, I am lost and hopeless without the gospel. Because let me tell you also, there is no difference between the goody two-shoes girl or a murderer or a rapist or whatever it is. There is no difference between us in that we don't deserve heaven by ourselves. We don't deserve all of God's goodness, and he doesn't care. He doesn't care because with God, it's not about what you deserve. It's about the fact that he's already chosen to love us. And that's it. The end. My emotional support teddy bear, Jesus loves me. And that's it. It doesn't matter what's in our past. It just, in terms of how God treats us and sees us, it doesn't matter. So it was completely life-changing to me, and I started to learn what surrender really looks like, to live in it, to walk in it, and how walking in surrender can change my life from the inside out. And it was so life-changing to me that I was like, everybody needs to go through recovery. Shh, quiet, quit tapping the mic. And so I pretty much immediately started jumping into leading recovery. Started leading dozens of women through. And I got a front row seat to watching hopeless, jaded, bitter, trapped women walk into freedom and joy and healing and abundant life right in front of my eyes. Because that's what he does. All he's asking for is our surrender. That was my barrier. That's why I wasn't hearing God. That's why I wasn't experiencing life change. Again, I was checking all my boxes, but I didn't know about walking in surrender. As much as I'd love to say it was smooth sailing from then on, though, I was still deeply struggling with the lack of forward movement in my career. I felt small and like a waste of education. That lie that the enemy had attached to my identity, that my worth lay in my success, dug its way even deeper to the point where I felt like the only real area where I had any worth was in recovery. Because it was the only place I felt like I brought something to the table that mattered. I also had a major falling out with my best friend. I was pregnant with our first child, and I was in perinatal depression. And when I get really depressed, I become really toxic and negative. And it took a toll on our friendship. And we got into a huge fight, and she nearly left. Again, the enemy's like, oh, see, you didn't say and do everything perfectly. So she left. She left you because you're not worth sticking around for. This friend came back, though. Because when you're walking in the gospel, God first reconciles us to himself, and then he says, now go walk in reconciliation with everyone around you. Every time. Now, it doesn't mean you live under abuse and you don't have good boundaries. I'm not talking about that, but I'm talking about that as far as it depends on you, be at peace with all men. Then 3 years after that, we had our son, Aiden. And out of nowhere, God asked us to move to Colorado. Yes, I love Colorado now. Woo now. Back then, no woo. I was very Texan. I am distantly related to Davy Crockett, for those who know who that is. So leaving my family and my community, and I had started building, I'd actually helped start the recovery program at a new branch of our church, and I didn't want to leave there. Everything I had built, but God said, do you trust me enough to follow me? And so I said yes. Now, so we moved here, found a church relatively quickly, got plugged in, started leading small groups as Ben and I always do. And a couple years into it, my church asked me to step into their communications coordinator position. And I was thrilled. My career had remained a source of shame to me, and it felt like I was finally stepping into something that mattered, and like maybe I would finally feel valued in the workforce. And at first it was going really well. I did feel valued. They told me I was the right person in the right seat on the bus. They cared about my ideas and my input. But then a few months in, it started to deteriorate. They have a strong hustle culture where it's expected that you just keep working until it's done, and you bring that can-do attitude to every obstacle. I had 2 little kids and a desire for boundaries, but I was serving on 4 different teams and not charging for all of the work I was doing. But that still wasn't enough. I was also weak in my time management and a little too honest about my anxieties. And admitting to your anxieties doesn't really fit well with a can-do attitude. So out of the blue, my manager, who'd become a close friend, fired me. She said I hadn't done what I said I could do. And I was devastated. The one place I thought I'd be safe, where I'd be valued and mentored, turned out to be None of those things. And I don't have time to get into all of the way the hurts piled up from them and from me. I did not handle it well. I lashed out at my manager. But I didn't give up on the church. I kept going because I do believe in not leaving a church out of hurt, as long as there's still healthy things going on there. Because God asks us to be committed to each other as a family. But my bitterness and resentment was growing so far and so fast that it was physically painful for me to be present at church. So finally, 6 months after that, after I got fired, we left and we came here. And immediately Ben was like, yes, this is it, we're all in. And even being here in this place of grace and safety and acceptance, I still couldn't be here without pain. So I stopped coming to church for 6 months. I actually felt like it would be safer for my faith if I did stop, because I was just so angry at God and church and myself, everybody. So I sank deeper and deeper into this depression to the point where I started deeply struggling with suicide ideation. Instead of just having a thought of, I wonder if this is what people feel like, it was like, no, this is how I feel, and I don't want to be here anymore. And I told my best friend, and again, when I'm really depressed, I can get really negative, and it weighed too heavily on her. And she finally decided, Emily, this is too heavy for me. It's taking a toll on my mental health. I can't be your friend anymore. So at the moment when I most needed people to stay beside me and tell me I was worth sticking beside, she left. And she abandoned me. And again, the enemy said, this is all you're ever going to experience is rejection. Because you're not worth sticking around. You're too broken. So at that point, I can tell you that if it weren't for my kids and my husband's unconditional love, I wouldn't be here anymore. This time when I was in the dark night of my soul, there was no dramatic rescue from God. It was slow and it was subtle. I started rebuilding my life and I decided I did not care about people's expectations anymore. I was using expectations to earn acceptance. And if I'm trying to live my life constantly fulfilling your expectations and you still leave me, then why am I trying to meet your expectations in the first place? And that is part of what God was breaking off of me. And that was, it's a lot, I imagine it a lot like cancer in your spine. Your spine, of course, is so complex, all these nerves and all these things running through it. If you get cancer, you have to have a very skilled surgeon to remove it. And that was so, it was so that cancer of the soul, that I don't have worth because of all these things. It was so woven into who I was that God had to take a knife. And that's why it hurt so badly. So as I started rebuilding my life, one of the best parts was my renewed passions for books, which turned into a job. So again, that thing that was like, oh, if I just have this, then I'll have fulfillment. And God gave that to me, and I love my job. I get to plan fantasy book events, and I get to build community in the loneliest generations of all time around these books that we love. I also started coming back to church. Clearly, here I am, a little over a year ago, and I've been slowly rebuilding my relationship with God. And none of it's come easy. I still have to constantly wrestle with, is God good if he allows these things to happen to me? Or if he allows them to happen, worse things to happen to the people that I love? And it's hard because the enemy is going to constantly try to reinforce that lie that all kinds of lies, that if God does not protect you from bad things, he doesn't love you. And I was thinking about it this morning in worship, with all of the lies that have been attached to my identity, my coping mechanism is hiding. I want to hide. Because if I'm hiding and I don't put myself out there and I'm not vulnerable and I don't take risks, then you can't judge me, you can't critique me, and you can't leave me and you can't abandon me. So hiding was my refuge. And today God said, well, but what if you hid in me? What if you quit hiding from the people around you or hiding from risky opportunities that I'm calling you into, and you hide in me? And I can tell you, it does not mean hiding in him protects me from other bad things. That's not how it works. But I can tell you that hiding in him means that in his presence, I can have joy and I can have peace and I can have hope and I can have healing. And it doesn't matter what's going on around me, because if God's giving me all of those, then I have abundant life. And I can tell you right now, family, your circumstances are not in the way of your abundant life. They're not. The enemy will lie to you and say you can't have abundant life until this happens, or until this happens, until you get free from this, or until you get healed from that, until you have this thing that your life feels incomplete without. The enemy tries to convince us. But that's not abundant life, friends. That's not freedom. Abundant life is all of this is falling apart around me, but you are my safe place. And you give me joy and you give me hope and you promised me that you began a good work in me and you're not done yet. And so if it's not good, then he's not done. So today I want to challenge you to think about, what are the lies you are believing about yourself? What are the lies you are believing about God? And what are the lies you are believing about abundant life? Because you know what the enemy spoke over me? The enemy spoke over me rejection. You will be rejected your whole life because you aren't good enough. Your weaknesses are bigger than your strengths. But that's not what Jesus speaks over me. And it's not what he speaks over you. So I just want to invite you to dig in and ask God, what have I just accepted to be true? That I'm only ever going to be abandoned and rejected, that I am a failure, that no one wants me, that it's because of the way I look, or because I haven't achieved enough, or because I'm weird, that I'm only ever going to be the divorced one, the broken one, the addicted one, the unhealthy one, the sick one. Because that's what the enemy writes over our identities. But Jesus comes and he erases that and says, I call you beloved. I call you accepted. I call you redeemed. I call you forgiven. And I am your sense of belonging. And what I say trumps what anybody else has to say about you. So I just want to invite you to come up, ask for prayer. I know it feels weird. I know it feels scary. Nobody is making assumptions about you if you come up here, by the way. They're not thinking you're more broken than the other people or anything else. Maybe they're actually jealous that you were brave enough to say, I need my community to stand by me in truth because I'm done with the lies. Thank you for your time.